Miami's getting ready for the arrival of FC Barcelona. On Tuesday, August 6th, Bayfront Park is the venue for Barca Fest Miami. It's an event packed with fun, music, and a lot of Barca. Entertainment, Barca store, and food trucks. But the main attraction of the party will be live performances by Playing Skills and Pedro Capó, who's had one of the biggest hits of the summer. See you at Bayfront Park on August 6th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. to enjoy the Barca Fest.
TV party tonight! TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated to our favorite shows!
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hippo Toes.
Scary dog!
Blurson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Good afternoon, as it were. This is TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And today, our favorite show is one you probably didn't watch because it only lasted one season, then it got canceled. From 2011, ladies and gentlemen, FX presents Lights Out, starring Holt McCallany? Pablo McElhaney, thank you. Pablo Schreiber, you might know him from Orange is the New Black and one season of The Wire, plus like 1,000
Law and Order SVU,
and like 1,000 other television projects. Catherine McCormick, Stacy Keach, Meredith Hagner, etc., etc., etc. Joining me tonight is the punchy pugilist, Mr. Toxic Masculinity. His favorite comics were go as far as the 80s and no further. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
Good afternoon, Mark. This is an odd time for us to record, ladies and gentlemen. So if we're not seemingly all with it, don't blame the Viking.
Yeah, we are. We were on the move. It was a mobile sort of liquid recording. We were just kind of all over the place. Normally we do this at about 9 o'clock at night. We've had time to prepare. This one was on the fly. It was exciting, dynamic, all of those buzzwords. Pat, I just binged this in the last day or so, and I really enjoyed it. You know, it only lasted one season. We're going to talk about maybe why that is and definitely why that is. But it was one that, when it aired in 2011, I don't think I knew what it was. I knew it was about a boxer, but I didn't recognize the lead. I didn't know who else was in it besides Stacy Keach. And I think the marketing on it steered me in the wrong direction because I thought it was kind of a Rocky One thing where it was an ex-boxer who wasn't going to get back in the ring again and was kind of doing jobs for the mob, which is a part of it, but I thought that was the whole show. And I think that kind of turned me away from it. Turns out it's more like Rocky than you think. It's about second chances. And I ended up really, really enjoying it, and I'm sad I didn't see it in its initial run. What did you think of the show when it first ran?
So I actually was watching it when it did air on FX. It was something to look forward to. It used to air on Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken, in either the 9 or 10 p.m. spot. But yeah, I was curious based on the marketing more than anything. They would do these little bumper promos at the end of shows where it would show, gloves hanging over a rope and you hear the bell ring and it would just say lights out. And I was intrigued because there really hasn't been a network TV show about boxing or the fight game as a whole in quite a while. I think the last TV show that I remember before that centered around boxing in any way was Resurrection Boulevard, if you remember.
I have no idea what that is.
It was a Latino drama on Showtime about a family involving boxers. But the boxing was very much secondary.
I watch very little Showtime. There isn't a whole lot. I think the last two things I watched on Showtime were I'm Gonna Die Up Here, or I'm Dying Up Here, rather, which was 2 seasons, and they finally canceled it. And I honestly don't remember what else on Showtime I've watched, other than boxing.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, again, so as a boxing fan, it intrigued me. And then I was like, oh, well, who's in this? And I saw Stacy Keach, who's a phenomenal actor. I saw the lead was being played by Holt, who is not unfamiliar to boxing. He had been in Fight Club as the mechanic. He played the role in the Tyson HBO miniseries, in the Tyson HBO bio movie as Teddy Atlas.
Really?
And he had been yeah.
Huh.
And I think he was in one other movie. I'm not positive. But, so Holt had some credibility because Holt actually does train to fight outside of acting. And I was like, okay, this has potential. And, so I looked forward to it every week. And I thought it was very well written and structured. And I think it's a shame it didn't find an audience. And in some respects, it was a little bit ahead of its time for the kind of show it was.
When you consider what FX kind of specialized in, I was thinking about the most successful shows, and the three off the top of my head, as far as this kind of series on FX, series in the same milieu, obviously there's The Shield. And in The Shield, the lead is this badass who you cheer for because he's a badass. He is all piss, vinegar, and testosterone. He's also a shitty human being. Then you had Dennis Leary's character from Rescue Me, who isn't nearly as shitty as a human being, but he's still a shitty human being. Like, there are levels.
He's still a really shitty human being.
Yeah, he's just not as bad as Mackie. The man didn't murder a cop in the first episode of Rescue Me.
No, but I was really into Rescue Me. Sue me, I'm a Dennis Leary fan, more so for his acting than his stand-up. But I had to stop watching that show at a certain point because Tommy was just, so irredeemable. It's like, I don't care anymore.
You're not wrong. I quit watching the show, and then I think I picked up just the last season when it appeared on Netflix because I just wanted to know how it ended. But yeah, the show got so bad, and he became such a terrible human being. I could not continue watching that show without getting physically ill. Then you have, and I can't remember the character's name, you're better at the details than I am, the lead in Justified.
Oh, Raylan.
Yes. Now, he's an awesome human being, and Justified was a great show. He had a lot of charm. He was a very likable character. And so when you think about those three, Holt, how'd you pronounce it, McElhaney. As Patrick Lights Leary, he's not as likable, I think, as Raylan. He's definitely more likable than Mackie and Dennis Leary's character. But, gosh, boxing is just such a hard thing to find an audience for, especially, in 2011. There wasn't a tremendous amount of boxing on network television. I don't think there was any at the time. I think if you were looking for boxing, it was HBO, Showtime, and ESPN, maybe. It certainly isn't as accessible as it is now with all the streaming services. So right there, I think you have a hard time finding an audience. Then then he himself, as much as I liked him personally, I don't know if he's as accessible or as interesting a character as the three I've named before. And that might have been the first problem with this show, is you kind of watch The Shield just to see how deep and how bad things were going to get. Kind of the same thing with Rescue Me. And then you watch Justified just to see what awesome thing Raylan was going to do in the next episode, but also how deep and bad things were going to get. And I think Lights Out struggled in those two areas.
Well, the plight of that, and I'll compare it to another show, it was somewhat similar in that is almost like that of Entourage, where, the show is about a movie star. The movie star himself is largely a product of the circumstances around him that manipulate and control his decisions. Being a fighter is very much the same thing. And that's why in Entourage, the credit listings, they listed Kevin Connolly first as E, because he's largely responsible for everything going on, more so in that puppet master type role. In this, oftentimes Patrick was not responsible for what went on. It had a lot more to do with Johnny, his brother, or his father, or in later episodes we'll get to Ed Romeo. He's never the one leading the ship. He's being led.
Yeah. Yeah, Mackie created a lot of his own circumstances.
And Raylan didn't necessarily create them, but he took control of them.
Yeah. this one seemed almost a victim of his circumstances. Let's run through this. You have Pablo Schreiber as Johnny Leary. Again, he played he played one of the leads in season 2 of The Wire on the docks. He was porn stash in Orange Is the New Black, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's on out of whatever production companies are working out of New York. You'll find him in a lot of those dramas. So you have a situation where Johnny Leary is managing Lights, and he mismanages his money. He creates a lot of situations where he digs the hole, and then Lights has to pull him out of it, or pull them out of it, or pull himself out of the hole that Johnny dug for him. And I think that's a lot of this show, is Johnny does a thing, it causes havoc in Lights' life. Life has to then figure out how he's going to deal with it. And I want to skip ahead here. We'll come back, but I want to skip ahead to the episodes with Iman Walker, who plays Ed Romeo, as an ex-trainer of one of Lights' competitors, the current heavyweight champion of the world, and the guy that beat him in a controversial split decision that went to Canelo. Sorry, that went to Reynolds. Reynolds is his name, Death Row Reynolds, and that also informs a lot of what happens in this series. So anyway, Iman Walker, who is famous for his lead role in Oz as I had his name.
Oh, really? Yourself, come on.
It's not Arabizi. Damn it.
Come on, Mark.
I'm going to look it up.
Oh, this is so depressing.
I know. I have a terrible memory. My memory is the worst. Kareem Saeed. I got it. Saeed. He was the head of the Muslims, and he was a lead on Oz. Anyway, he plays an out of work trainer, kind of on a farm when we find him, and he's working with children. And he used to be the trainer for Reynolds, and I love his character. First of all, Iman Walker is a hell of an actor. Another one of the New York production company standards. You'll find him in a bunch of stuff shot in that area. But he's amazing. But he kind of comes in, and it's like the shows where people go on a diet, and the dietitian kind of walks in, sees what you have in your fridge, like looks around at your life and says, "Here's all the things that's wrong with you that made you fat in the first place." He does that, but with Lights as a boxer. And he's like, "Your family, your wife and your daughters, this is all fine. This is all great. This is going to support you and make you a better fighter. Your brother, your father, and your sister are all terrible, and you should cut them out of your life." And as a viewer,
he gives one of the best lines of the show when they first go eat at the sister's diner, and which he doesn't even let him eat the food she makes,
right,
which is great. He tosses it in the garbage outside to not be offensive. But once he finds out that Lights bought the diner for his sister that she was waiting tables at, he says, "Damn, Lights, how many titties you got?"
And it's true, I think you want to do. Lights is and this goes back to what I started off with. And as far as his character, Lights is a giving, moral, good guy. The actor Holt does puppy dog face really, really well. It's one of the defining features of his physical character. He looks so sad through these 13 episodes most of the time. It's really heartbreaking.
He was very well cast in that part, I have to say, because as a fighter, you have to do two things, or at least playing a fighter, you do. You have to project an aura of legitimate badassery. Like, you know what? I probably wouldn't fuck with this guy. He looks like he could handle himself. But at the same time, you have to make yourself appear vulnerable. Yeah. And he's able to do both of those really well.
Yeah, physically from the neck down, he feels very Cro-Magnon, very badass, he could punch through a steel wall. But in the face, he has these vulnerable eyes that make me feel so bad for him in his situations. Like a lot of the scenes with his wife where he's just pleading for forgiveness and trying to explain himself and, kind of throwing himself in the way of whatever could harm anyone in his family and taking those hits. And you look at his eyes and they just tell you the whole story. And as a viewer, you're like, you're caught up in that. You really feel sympathetic for him. Whereas I think you look at some of these other leads in these FX shows and you're like, yeah, you're all kind of scumbags and I don't feel bad for you at all. Just without you, we won't have a show. Where this guy, like, I truly felt bad for him. And that takes me back to this episode with Iman Walker where he's trying to get him to make some changes that'll make him a better person. And that is, cutting out the brother, the sister, and the father. The father kind of left on his own, which we'll get to. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm in agreement with Saeed. Get these people out of your life. They're terrible, And when he fires them eventually, when he God, it's like watching a romantic breakup. I mean, didn't bring me to tears, but came close. It was heartbreaking.
It was, oh man, and like you got to binge this all like at the time. I'm watching this week to week, and I'm just like, when that episode aired, I was so pissed. I was like, you know what, Patrick? You just crossed the Vic Mackey line, and now I hope they get you. I hope Reynolds knocks your fucking head off.
I didn't get that bad. And I'll tell you.
No, I was pretty upset.
Go ahead.
I was pretty upset. And I'll say this, it's funny too, because they make the point at the beginning when he's training with Romeo that, hey, I call all the shots. That's it. You don't ask questions. Do what I tell you to do. And we mentioned earlier that Holt had played Teddy Atlas in a Mike Tyson biopic. So that's pretty much how Teddy is known to run a camp, is that Teddy is like a drill sergeant. You don't ask questions. You give completely to him what he asks for, and that's it. Or else he snaps and calls it, or that's it. So it's kind of funny with Art Imitating Life at that point, where Holt had played this guy, and now he's having this type of trainer in a show about, his character taking control of that.
Johnny Leary as the shitty brother, I thought was perfectly well casted. Pablo Schreiber really does a great job of playing a scumbag.
Yeah, he's got a rat face.
Yeah, he really does. He has a charm and a wit about him, but it's a sleazy car salesman. I'm gonna gently fuck you in the ass kind of a charm.
Yeah,
and he does it very well. It's why he works as porn stash on Orange. Worked past tense as Orange is the New Black on as porn stash on Orange is the New Black. It's why he worked in his one season of The Wire. He
worked as a crazy obsessed stalker / attempted rapist in Law and Order SVU.
Yes. He may be typecasted, but it works for him, and he gets a lot of work doing it. And it's, and the one thing that saves him, like, there are a lot of shows where this kind of character, you just root for him to fall and get his comeuppance the whole series, and it's just the height of frustration when it goes on and on and on, and it never happens. But I'll tell you, he has a couple of moments that lessen the tension derived from wanting to see him get his comeuppance. And, things like the times that Patrick confronts him, and he's like, all right, hit me. Do whatever you need to do. Just get this out of your system. And you're like, oh. It's more fun when... Damn it, it's more fun when you resist.
I almost dislike Margaret more than I like Johnny, to be honest.
So, Margaret is played by Elizabeth Marvel, which sounds like it was a character invented from Marvel Comics, but let's move on. She actually starts out as kind of a non-entity in the first half of the series, but around the time that Amon Walker shows up, she starts having more to do, and you realize what a poisonous snake she is. And then by the end of it, you're like, wow, you're actually the shittier sibling. You just didn't have as much control over Lights' life.
Well, that's the part of it, too, is that at least Johnny, at a certain point, okay, Johnny was a fighter. They talk about that, and then he detached a retina and decided not to come back and fight because he saw more money, from the other end of it. But he had to at some point do something right if he had always been Patrick's manager, because at some point they had $12 million to burn on this bad investment. So up to a certain point, he did something right.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret, who knows nothing of boxing other than her father is a fight trainer who owns a gym, her brother was the heavyweight champion, and her other brother used to box, why is she fit to give him career advice on Ed Romeo being bad for him?
Right. Yeah.
You were fucking waiting tables at some dive diner in Bayonne that he bought for you. What qualifies you? You buy your dishes secondhand in an alley. What qualifies you to give him advice on dumping Ed Romeo as his trainer?
Not if someone were to ask me, what is this show about, but you can't say it's about boxing, the show is about guilt.
Shitty families ruining the one successful member?
I'm going to go with guilt. There's so much guilt driving.
How about we further it by saying Catholic guilt?
I almost went Irish Catholic guilt, and I was like, I don't want to offend anyone necessarily. But
I'm Irish and was raised Catholic, so yeah, it's appropriate. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so as long as you're going to stand next to me while I make that claim, then yes, this show is about Irish Catholic guilt.
And we're not pulling the Catholic element out of nowhere. The church and some of its figures favor really heavily in the early episodes. Part of how Teresa, the wife, finds out that they lost their money is that they have a missionary come from Haiti that is working with their local Catholic church, and she pledges $50,000 to help them rebuild the church in the wake of the Haiti earthquakes that had hit in 2010. And then Light tells her, "Hey, that's not going to happen because we don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of."
Right. Which is let's take a moment from the talking about the cast, and let's just set up a couple of things here. When we meet this family, when we meet this cast of characters, it's 5 years after he loses the championship belt, the heavyweight championship of the world, to Death Row Reynolds, in a controversial split decision. What made it controversial was, without even getting into some of the specifics of the fight, because they don't show you the whole fight, so you really don't know why the judges gave it one way or the other. Going into the last round, they thought they were ahead enough to where they could win this by a decision. And Stacy Keach, and this is important, and we need to really flesh it out and talk about it. Stacy Keach, who is the father, gives advice to his son, "Hey, coast to victory." Very famous line from the MMA world. Just kind of defend
and protect your cut eye.
Yeah, protect your eye. Don't go on the offensive. Don't try to finish him off. You'll leave yourself open to possibly getting taken out. You're ahead on the cards. You're going to win by decision. And Lights has an opportunity. There's a moment in the fight where Reynolds is against the ropes, and he's pretty much out on his feet. And had Lights proceeded, there was at least a 51% chance he was going to knock the guy out. But he doesn't. He listens to his dad. He hesitates. The round ends, and he loses by split decision. At which point, he's beaten up so bad that his wife, Teresa, who, oh my God, through most of this series, I just kept screaming, "You're an Adrian, you're an Adrian, you're an Adrian," and I wanted to throw my computer every time she was on screen. She gets a little bit better by the end of the season. But oof, does she start off terrible. Tells him, "Hey, enough's enough. Let's do something. You're $12 million richer than you were. Let's put me through medical school. I'll be a doctor, and I'll take care of us, and you raise our children and not get, dementia." And so 5 years later, they've lost all the money. She's still in medical school, and they don't know. They are in a position where they're in debt to the IRS. And he's been out of the fight game for 5 years. And during that time, it's hotly debated whether or not he should have gone out as the winner of that fight. So there's that lingering issue. And that's where this series picks up. He's down on his luck and in need of fast money. And his whole world is sort of teetering on the brink. So so going back to the sister, just so we can put a period on that. In the beginning, she's just kind of there serving him food, providing a little bit of context. But where things start to go off the rails for her, there's two things. One, she starts dating the mob boss that helps him out earlier in the season, which we need to talk about. But also, she's one of the people that benefited from his largesse, and she comes across as saying, hey, family first, family first, family first. You just don't throw away your family. But there's this shitty undercurrent of her going, oh my God, the guy I'm living off of might be cutting me out. This isn't good. I need to fix this. Yep. And there's so much of that in this series that it made my blood boil and my skin crawl.
Well, and that's the one about Stacy Keach's character, at least. He is, he did put work in with Patrick. He trained him. He was with him through winning the championship and everything. And at a certain point, when he is not going to train him, when he walks away and forces Lights to basically seek out Romeo as an alternative, he chose to walk away. He chose that. He eventually gets guilted, there's that word again, by his other son and daughter to train Patrick again, because they've figured out that Romeo is basically telling him, your family are a bunch of leeches and you need to stop the bleeding. But it's not for his own benefit, it's for his kids. So at least he's somewhat understandable in that.
Here's my problem with the Stacy Keach character. First of all, I don't think anyone here gives a bad performance, so I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time talking about performances. I think everyone's pretty solid. Here's my problem with the Stacy Keach character and his B and C plots in this show. And this is, I think, one of my problems with the show overall. There are certain threads that maybe they left open because they thought they'd get at least 2 or 3 seasons out of this show. They didn't expect it to be cut at one. But I feel like they set up Stacy Keach in a B or C plot to where, it's the "it should have been you" story, where clearly he favored the baby of the family, Johnny Leary. Clearly he thought he was the one that was going to have the success. He's the one that he wanted to have the success, but it's the older mongrel brother, with less talent, that ends up becoming the successful one. And there's this unspoken tension. There's that word again. Between Stacy Keach and Holt, to where I never felt like the character that Stacy Keach is playing, the father, Robert Pops Leary, ever really, I don't quite know how to put this, so I'm going to kind of just struggle through it. I never felt like he was 100% with Patrick. Iman talks about your family is holding you back, and I think one of those big areas was, you have on the one hand Patrick, who hesitates because he's trying to get approval from his father, which never comes. And on the other hand, and this is unspoken and it's not dealt with and it's kind of dropped, because they start to set it up like it's going to happen. You're going to finally get that admission from Stacy Keach. And then it kind of just goes nowhere and it dissipates and it's just left out there hanging, which I have an issue with. But you almost get this feeling like he was never 100% with his eldest son because of guilt, frustration, negative feelings about the younger son not achieving greatness. You weren't the right son to have all of this success. And that is a huge wall between those two characters.
I see where you're coming from with that. I think it was definitely an avenue that could have been explored more. But there are a lot of moving parts in this show, so I get why more time wasn't necessarily spent on that than what we got. I think it was opportunity there, especially once Ed was dismissed.
Yeah.
And you had that whole instance. I think that was something they could have tapped into more. to add a little bit because the show got a little bit one-noted after that.
Yeah.
There's not a tremendous amount more episodes after that, but it lacked a lot of the good human drama where a lot of the good points of the show came from.
Yeah, see, I said before, initially I avoided the show because I didn't need to see the first half of the original Rocky movie made into a modern-day television show. We got it. He's working for the mob. This never ends well. He's going to be in deep with, and end up between a rock and a hard place. I've seen it. I don't care to see it again. I have I have an infant daughter I have to raise at this time. And now I was a little too harsh and a little too quick to judge, but there is elements of that in this. He delivers a bag of money, which will come up later, as they start to investigate the mob and they start to investigate bribed politicians and whatnot. And I found that to be the least interesting stuff of the show. The family drama I thought was great. The boxing stuff I thought was great. The stuff between Iman Walker and Holt, I think is some of the best grist for the mill in the entire show. When they're dealing with the mob boss, I was half asleep. I was on my phone, I think, playing a video game.
However, I will say the politician broad led to a guest appearance from one of my favorite character actors, David Morse.
Okay.
Do you not remember this?
I mean, just talk. Tell me about it.
So, very early in the show, Mark mentioned how Patrick drops off this cake box of money to a politician at a birthday party, and under the pretense of signing autographs or whatever. And eventually, it's almost forgotten about midway through the show. But then it gets referenced again after we lose at Romeo, where there's a councilman who was the one who took the bribe is brought in for questioning because he gets busted for a prostitution scandal, and he starts giving the FBI these little hints and stuff about what's going to go on. So they pick up Lights, and through this episode we found Lights at the secondhand alleyway plate buying store with his sister, and he runs into another former heavyweight champion, Jerry Reigns, the Rainmaker, who Lights had fought back in the day and beat. And he's played by David Morse. David Morse, amazing character actor. He was in St. Elsewhere for a while as a bit player, who eventually turned into Boomer Morrison. He's in tons of movies, 12 Monkeys, The Rock. He had a great show on CBS called Hack. Does a lot of theater. Amazing actor. Watch anything he's in. He's great. But he's also suffering from very advanced pugilistic dementia, which we didn't talk about yet, which is something that Patrick is apparently seeing the early oncomings of in this show. And that creates good family drama with his middle daughter, who becomes kind of very involved in finding more out about this. But Jerry's full on, I can't remember stuff that happened yesterday. And Patrick tries to help him out, gets him a job at the gym, sweeping up and stuff. But, guys there don't realize that he's not capable of taking punches. And one guy wants to spar with him, so it turns into a whole scene. And basically what they do is they find a way to make Jerry some money by having him rough up this councilman and take evidence that he had on Lights. And it's kind of funny because they even make light of his Alzheimer's at that point.
Right.
But David Morse is so good in the part. Like that episode alone, like they should have sent that in to try to get him nominated for some kind of like Emmy for outstanding guest appearance because he was great. Yeah,
now I'm with you. Yeah, his stuff in the series is great. Look, if I can just be a little personal for a second. I won't. This isn't about my fucking dog from 20 years ago.
Sure.
Yes, sir. But I'll tell you what. There are certain things I watch now, given my current circumstances, and I'm like, wow, boy, does this speak to me. I'm not going to get into, like I said, a lot of the details, but I'm in a situation now where I have a lot of doctor-controlled circumstances. There are certain things I can do, certain things I can't do. I'm not allowed. I can't drive. I technically, until the middle of next week, and I have been for the past almost month, can't be alone. I have to be watched. You have a lot of the people, and prior to all of this, I was an extremely independent, I'll just do it myself, fucking leave me alone kind of a guy. And, come what may, succeed or fail, I will succeed or fail on my own two goddamn feet. And to be in a situation where you have this gaggle of adults around you having to tell you what to do and what you can't do, boy, did I feel for him when he's in the middle of this gym throwing a well-deserved tantrum and saying the line, "Everyone's telling me what I can and can't do." And I'm like, brother, I don't have dementia, but boy, am I with you. I was kind of cheering for him and sad at the same time. And that's what happens. Like, I'm living that reality now, that there are certain circumstances where, because of your health and because people are trying to help you, and I really do want to stress that, like, I'm grateful for modern medicine and family, because without either, I would be I'd be dying at the moment. So, but it doesn't change the fact that as a man, as an independent man, when you're put into those circumstances, how you're made to feel like an infant, you're made to feel like a cripple, and how that weighs on your psyche, how that weighs on your confidence, and you see all of that in the just 2 episodes that David Morse is in, and it's amazing, and it's some of the best stuff of the series. Like I said, I think that's one of the criticisms of Lights Out that I have, is that there's parts of it that are better than The Shield, better than Justified, and then there's some of it that it's the dullest thing I've ever seen, and I don't like. The writing is just so uneven. It's amazing they can hit these high highs, but then they put in stuff where it's like, did you get a studio note from somebody at Fox that says this is not enough like The Shield? You need to fix it. We have a formula. You guys are straying too far from the formula. Fucking fix it. This is what the people want. And that's sometimes how the show comes across. You get really great stuff with David Morse, and then some of the times you get some horse shit where it's like, they threw this in here because that's the kind of shit they put on FX.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're right. He gives an amazing performance. And when you first mentioned it, I think it's because I wasn't familiar with the actor's name. But as you were talking, and I looked up the episodes, I'm like, oh, that's right. Oh my god, I loved all that stuff.
Yeah, I forget if you watched Treme or not.
I did. Come on, David Simon.
But he was, what's that?
Come on, David Simon. I think the only thing by David Simon I haven't watched is Generation Kill.
Yeah, just making sure. But again, he was probably the highlight of that show too.
Oh gosh, I forgot what character he plays.
The only honest cop in the whole department.
Oh, that's right. Right. That show got better as the seasons wore on, when it wasn't so much about George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that element of the show, the dementia part of it, because again, it's one of these things where the show sometimes sets things up and then doesn't pay it off for several episodes later, sometimes a whole season later. So from the very beginning, they set up that Lights has pugilistic dementia. And there's a couple of scenes of him forgetting things. Can't remember where his car is. Luckily, he's not with Robert De Niro from Jackie Brown, so he doesn't get shot.
That's a reference to a show last night, folks.
Thank you, Pat. And now the boys in the band. Each and every one of them's a bad mother in his own right. So, he can't find his car, and he's forgetting dates, and he's a little not with it. And then suddenly he's cured for several episodes, almost the entire season. And
it's like again, we talk about Rocky, how somehow, despite being slightly punchy and whatever in the first Rocky, he gets smarter and better looking with each iteration and more well educated up until Rocky 5 when he just gets punchy.
Yeah. Yeah, Rocky 3, suddenly his dementia was cured. His facial features were made handsome. His hair was nice. He was a whole different guy in Rocky 3. Remember that? Remember the 80s, Pat?
Yeah, I do.
And then up until the end of Rocky 4, much the same thing. And then you're right. By Rocky 5, he's back to being, a Morlock.
Or moron, depending.
But even Rocky Balboa, he seemed to have gotten his wits back about him again. He wasn't so. And then the Creed movies, he's just fine. He's just old and sad. But that's reviews for another day. Actually, those are reviews we've already done. You can check them out in our archives on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. In any case, it was as if the writers forgot they set this up as one of the problems, and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, he's got pugilistic dementia. Let's be sure to end the series with this.
Yeah, I think it's also the hard part of doing 40-minute episodes and then finding out during production eventually that, like, hey, we're not finding an audience. This is the end.
Yep. I mentioned Teresa, and we can't end the show without talking about the other half of the cast here, which is the wife and the daughters.
Leary girls.
The Leary girls. Yep. So let's talk about the Adrian in the room. Good old Teresa, played by Catherine McCormick.
Yeah. There you go.
She's fine. She gives a fine performance, and on the Adrian scale, at least for the first half of the series, she's pretty high up there. She's definitely somebody I would not have minded if he had strangled. But I don't know. I kind of softened towards her. She softens. When she finally gets to the conclusion that, hey, maybe turning your husband into a eunuch isn't a great idea, she seems to bend a bit and become, especially I think when she's confronted with the reality of their financial situation. It's like, well, don't have a lot of choices here, so this is as good a plan as any. But I think even as like a character, she's not as bad in the second half of the season as she is in the first. In the first, she's a fucking harpy shrew.
She really... And I have to give that character a little bit of grace because, quite frankly, she's had very vital information about her life withheld from her, and the life of her children, for that matter. So I can cut her a little more slack than I would your standard Adrian on the Adrian scale. She still annoys the piss out of me, though.
Yeah. I think what saves her is that even at her worst, she clearly loves her husband. I think at heart, she's not a terrible human being. So some of the acting choices and some of the character decisions that are made, some of the writing of her, isn't as sharp in a negative way as some of the other characters we've talked about on TV Party tonight when we reference the Adrian scale. Like, I called her a harpy shrew, and I stand by it. But I think that's post 5 years of getting her way, of having her husband kind of yes ma'am her, and then things suddenly taking a turn, and and the curtains are all lifted, and suddenly the light shows all the dirt around them, and after a bit of yikes, what have you done? She reacts pretty well. I mean, they don't make... it's not like she's the females from Rescue Me, where they're all terrible, too. God, was there even a single character in Rescue Me that was in any way a decent human being? Lou. Maybe Lou.
Well, remember when he got involved with the prostitute who ripped him off?
Vaguely.
Like, he thought this prostitute was in love with him, and he was going to, run off with her, and then she just took his life savings.
I vaguely remember this, yeah.
Yeah, so even Lou at that point.
Well, yeah, so she's a better female character than anybody in Rescue Me. That's about all I got there. You mentioned, when we were talking about this offline, you mentioned stuff about the daughters. I want you to just kind of take the ball here and run with it. Tell me what you thought of the we don't really have to talk about the youngest one. She's just kind of there. And she's not terrible, so she's fine. Her
best stuff is the scenes with Ed Romeo, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, far and away, yeah. Some of very, very touching stuff between Amon Walker and this child actress. Robert Winfrey will tell you on these shows that, boy, with child acting, is it a 50-50 shot that it's going to be the worst thing ever. But I have to say, the child cast in this, nobody gives a bad performance. They're all fine. As characters, though, I think you had issues with, I guess, the eldest daughter, or is it the middle one? This is where I want you to run.
Okay, well, the middle daughter is Danielle, I believe, is the name.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that would make the older one. Gotcha. Ava's character is just stereotypical older daughter. Think like Kirk Cameron on Growing Pains, or just this stereotypical older sibling who's not the brightest, is a little bit lazy, and is wanting to get by life on looks and more likely to get into trouble. That's fine. You're there. Okay, good. The middle one, again, stereotype, much more involved technically or intellectually, and as a result of that intellectual curiosity and seeing signs in her dad that she doesn't necessarily like or feel comfortable about, she starts researching pugilistic dementia and finds out it's this, medical condition very common to boxers, and now we're into more of the era of CTE where that's kind of fell by the wayside of, just the constant concussive damage to the head causes your cognitive brain functions to disintegrate, deteriorate, and eventually stop. And she becomes obsessed with this, and when she meets Ed, oh wow, what a shock, we're going back to Eamon Walker again. She's, having this great heart-to-heart about how she can't deal with her dad getting hit anymore because of this, because she already sees it happening. And both Ed and Patrick have this talk with her where, that's how Grandpa trained me to fight. Ed's training me to not get hit like that and do these things. And we need this for the family. And kind of sets her at ease a little bit and ends her arc with that very abruptly, which is a shame. Because I think had this series had more life, you could have played that into, maybe more strife with her and the mother, where, Mom, you're a fucking doctor. How do you not see this happening?
Yeah, I think in later seasons we would have gotten, I think with both daughters, a lot of storyline revolving resentment. And that's the funny thing. We talked about what are the overall themes of this show. Irish Catholic guilt pretty much sums up season 1. I think season 2 would have bled into resentment between family members. Resentment between the daughters and the mother, resentment between Lights and his family, his brother, his sister, his father. I think that's where this was starting to go. Unfortunately, like I said, the seeds were all there, but they never got a chance to water them.
And again, I think part of that is maybe they had to rush production when they found out the audience wasn't there and they were likely to get canceled. So they wanted to throw something together just to be able to, I don't know, maybe sell this to syndication or something like that.
Yeah, the funny thing is I don't think the show is done well anywhere. Like, I had to buy it off of Amazon Prime. I've never seen
it. Was on...
Go ahead.
It was on Netflix for quite a long time.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what the numbers were. Let's talk about boxing. I think that's going to be the last part of the show. Let's talk about all the facets of boxing involved in the show, both real life and fictional. I'm going to ask you first, since you're my boxing analyst. What did you think of the technical boxing as presented in the show? We've often made fun of Rocky. Rocky is a lot of hooks and a lot of big punches, and nobody defends themselves, and it's not real boxing, but it looks really, really nice for the average viewer who just wants to see people get hit in the head. How does this compare?
I think the training sequences, particularly those of Patrick, are very well done. And again, part of that is because Holt, trains as a boxer when he's not in a role. So I think he brought a lot of credibility in that respect to it. I think Stacy Keach looks the part of a trainer, even if he's not physically performing it, which he's not. So I didn't mind him there. Eamon Walker, guiding through the technical aspects of it and talking to him, was great. The fights themselves, it's a little bit harder because they really have to shorten up what they do in the show because of the time constraints.
Yeah, everyone gets knocked out in the third round.
That's the thing of it is, you know, it's just not. It's not what it could be given more time. You're having, you know, a show where you have two 12-round fights scheduled to take place with just Patrick. There's also Omar's fight, a minor character earlier in the year, where it's a 12-round fight. How would you realistically portray a 12-round fight in a 40-minute television show when they have a hard time doing it in a 2-hour movie?
You know, when we all got together to watch the $100 Mayweather Pacquiao fight at my friend's house, it was a mixed group of people. Now, many of them, a lot of the girls, had come to watch fights before, but a lot of them kind of go off to a corner and coffee clutch themselves, and the guys watch the fight and the girls kibitz. Not being sexist, that's really what happens. And even when I used to have the MMA fights at my house, again, the girls kind of sat at the table and the boys watched the fights, and the children ran across the room. But I remember everyone tuned in to actually sit and watch Mayweather versus Pacquiao. That's why we were all there. That's what we were paying the money for. And when it was over, a couple of the girls, one in particular, was like, that was the most boring shit I've ever seen. What was the point of paying $100 for this? And I'm trying to explain to her that the object of boxing is to not get hit, and that's what makes Mayweather a genius in the ring. And that was the struggle. That was the story of that fight was, you know, Pacquiao had power, but he had a hard time finding Mayweather, and Mayweather is really, really great at being evasive. And that's boxing, folks. It sometimes doesn't, you know, look all that interesting, but you got to know what you're looking at, what you're looking for. And I remember her going on Facebook shortly after that, going blah, 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 blah. Now, she didn't tag me specifically, but that's who she was aiming that at. And I showed it to a couple of people who were there, and they were like, you can tell people all day long what boxing is, but generally speaking, the average person watching it just wants to see someone get hit in the head. And so you're presenting this show on television, knowing stuff like that, knowing what your audience wants versus what boxing really looks like. And gosh, what do you do then? What, you know, when you're the fight choreographer, when you're, you know, a technical director doing fight scenes, when you're a writer, how do you balance an audience, a potential audience full of people that just came for blood, to quote The Simpsons, versus the reality of what is the sport of kings?
Which you add that in again to a casual audience you're trying to win, plus time constraints, plus the narrative you're trying to tell. It's not likely you're going to see a 12-round fight play out in the course of less than 2 episodes, and they didn't have that ability to work with that. They had to make these fights happen real quick, and so they did. You had the fight with Diablo, which at least they try to cover that up by planting a seed of doubt that maybe they thought Barry K. Word had him take a dive to ensure that we got Patrick versus Death Row 3 or 2, whatever fight it was. I believe it's 3, that we got at the finale. But that was the fight they all wanted because that was the money fight to happen. But then again, in the finale, which we'll talk about, you know, in a little more detail, Patrick and Death Row have their long-awaited rubber match, and after 2 fights that went the distance, each guy taking one controversial one that, Patrick's been out for 5 years. He comes back and he lights Death Row up at the 3rd round, which takes his belt.
Right. the younger, more in shape, muscular Death Row, you know, who's been actively fighting for 5 years. Sure. 3 rounds, that's all I needed.
Well, I mean, you know, there's 2 ways to look at it. One is the precedent of that, where it's silly because this guy's been active and fighting everybody. But, you know, maybe he's fighting the heavyweight division of that time, where had he wanted to, had Vitaly Klitschko come out of retirement, he probably would have just murdered anybody at that time, too, based on the talent level that was there.
Sure. You know, look, if he's fighting a bunch of, you know, Ruiz Juniors and Dante Wilders, yeah, I get that. And they allude to it. They allude to the fight that the last 5 years he cleaned out a division full of tomato cans. I think I needed more than an illusion. And again, this is some of the problems with the writing is
They could have Rocky V'd it, and where Tommy Gunn has his press conference about how he just won the title. You beat Union Kane. Union Kane sucks.
Yeah, a little bit more writing about the where boxing is, or where it went to in the previous 5 years might have helped that story along. Might have, I'll say this I got a quick sidebar. The underground MMA fight that he has with Boss Rutan, my wife noticed I was just jumping in my seat watching it. I love that scene, and I kept projecting myself into it. And I was, and it's so. It was fun to see Boss Rutan, who I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah,
these days.
it's fun because we love Boss.
Yeah, he's great. In the one episode he's in, he's great. And whether or not it's believable that would actually happen in a no rules underground cage match it's not the point. At that point, it's just.
I don't think you can get out of an armbar by just pushing the guy's legs up.
Probably not. But at least he punched him. At least he won by punching him in the throat. I'll give him that. But yeah, I really enjoyed that bit. But going back to what we were talking about, yeah, I think it's hard. I think what you're talking about is they have to shorten up things. What happens in a boxing match is breaking people down over time. So you don't start to see things happen unless you get like a lucky punch or the guy's a tomato can. You don't really get to see a lot of falling all over the place earlier on. If you see it at all, you see it later. But they've only got a short window of time to show this stuff in a television show, so you get what you get, and you just kind of accept it. At that point, you have to realize you're watching a fictional program. The other side of this, and I'm just going to ask you kind of a general question here. I'm curious to see what your answer is. Obviously, the avatar they have for Don King is Reg E. Cathy, another Oz alumnus, another The Wire alumnus.
Who also went on to play Don King.
Just really? In what?
Hands of Stone.
Oh, okay. He plays Barry K. Word, again, the avatar for Don King. Who was the bigger crook, though, in boxing, all things considered? Bob Arum or Don King?
Oh, Don. Don by far.
50 words.
Arum, make no mistake, is a crook, but Arum also put a lot more work into doing what he did than did Don. Whereas, Arum's first involvement with boxing was getting involved with the Ali Chevalo fight, not to go off on a tangent. Bob fully admitted at that point in time he didn't really know anything about boxing. And Bob has always admitted he doesn't know much about boxing, but he hired the people who did. Don, meanwhile, claimed to be a connoisseur, also promoted his first event was a charity exhibition that Muhammad Ali would come in and box, at his old penitentiary that he was in for manslaughter, for stomping a guy to death in the street. And the whatever charity it was he was promoting never saw any of the money, mind you.
Okay, so he big time thief. Got it. 2011, an avatar for Don King, relevant? Tell me. I don't know.
Yes, because quite honestly, ask John Q. Public to name a boxing promoter and see what name they come up with.
No, Don King. No one knows who the hell Bob Arum is.
Exactly. Don King made himself a character with, his hair, his Only in America, all that stuff. Don King is not even hardly involved in boxing anymore. There are so few and far between guys signed to him, yet people still associate him maybe more than any other maybe even more than any other fighter at this point, with the exceptions of Ali or Tyson. If you get named to name a personality in the realm of boxing, I think most people's answers 1, 2, 3 would probably be Ali, Tyson, Don King.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of individual promoters that aren't themselves boxers promoting themselves, I think of what's his face from Golden Boy. You know who what's his face is?
Oscar.
Yeah, Oscar De La Hoya. That's the only one I can think of. Everybody else is sort of a nameless, faceless streaming app or, Top Rank, Showtime, Fox, Premier Boxing
Well,
Championships,
in a
and
perfect world, that's the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you shouldn't care about Oscar De La Hoya as a non-fighter while he's busy ruining the sport. You shouldn't care about the promoter. You shouldn't even really know who the promoter is. You should only know who the fighters are. Why does it matter whether it's Lou DiBella, Bob Arum, Gary Shaw, Al Heyman, whoever promoting the fight? Who gives a fuck?
Well, they've done a great
And
job
then
of
this,
masking themselves then.
In this, you've got the Don King allegory of Barry K. Word. And Reg Cathy's a great actor, and he plays this part well. So well, it probably landed him the part of Don King in Hands of Stone. Like, he shouldn't have had to audition. He should have just sent them a couple of scenes from this show. Like, oh, yep, you got it. Here you go.
Yeah.
But I will say, the one thing that interested me more than anything, maybe, had they gotten to a second season, is that they really show how influential Barry's business dealings are, where he gets JoJo Reynolds pulled out of the... Patrick wants a comeback fight with an easy touch. They pick a sparring partner named JoJo Reynolds. Barry puts the kibosh on that. Barry is able to give this kid Omar from Leary's gym a shot at the title if he gets the rights to Patrick's comeback fight, which Johnny, of course, signs away. All these things. And at the end of it, where you see they're having this meeting of all these fighters prior to Patrick's fight with Death Row who were allegedly screwed over by Barry K. Word, and Hal Brennan, the mobster, is trying to bring them together as a new promotional front to oppose Barry K. Word's dominance, and the key is getting Patrick involved in that. Almost basically a union of fighters. I think that could have played out interestingly had they had a second season. That would have been the narrative I would have liked to go with.
Yeah, there was a lot of murkiness because early on in the season they show a behind the door meeting between Hal and Barry, who are previously seen as at odds with one another. And then you have in the season finale, you have this bit where Hal brings all of these fighters together, and then you have Light saying, "Hey, we should reserve some of our earnings for a medical fund for fighters, so that we don't have everyone running around with dementia and being homeless." And then shortly after that, you have Barry messing with Light's head, saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, your fight with Death Row was bupkis. It was thrown. He was into Hal." And Hal made him throw the fight. And you have no idea if that's real or not. If he's just messing with the guy and inventing pictures out of the ether, or if it's all true. And they really never had an opportunity to follow up on it either. But I think that there were some good seeds for an interesting story for a few episodes to see if any of that were true. So the season finale, he ends up knocking out Reynolds. We talked a little bit about the how the fight looked. It looked like a Hollywood fight. It was fine. I feel like they dropped a lot of balls in the season finale. Like I said, stuff with... There was an opportunity there for Stacy Keach and Holt to really come together or to burst apart. Instead, they just kind of go to the fight. Like, all right, whatever. There's some stuff they're seeding for a season 2 that never comes, and then they have the fight, and then the thing ends with his dementia coming back from the dead. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't remember who won the fight, and his wife just kind of walks him out there, and the show ends. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, the ultimate Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah. So what'd you think?
It felt cheap. And I think that's because we knew the show was getting canceled at that point in time. If you were watching it, like they put it out that this is going to be the series finale, and it felt like a cheap stunt to try to get people interested and try to get them to revive it for a second season elsewhere. There was talk at the time of cancellation that ESPN was potentially looking to pick it up and do another scripted drama with the same way they did with like Playmakers, Tilt. They had minor success with a couple things in that vein, and they thought this could potentially be one, and they could use it as a lead-in for Friday Night Fights, which would have been interesting. I don't know how well it would have worked because you're going to see two very diametrically opposite portrayals of the fights. But it would have been an interesting concept. I probably would have been watching it, in all honesty. But yeah, it felt very cheap to me that's how they chose to end it, without really seeing. If you were going to do that to me, I would have rather seen you go the full gamut with it, not just leave it at that and then close the show. Have him really break down, show progressive stages of it, and then maybe launch a plea at the end to have fighters, get some kind of medical care.
I would have liked to have the ending be a little bit more mysterious. I really would have liked to have seen more of a cliffhanger ending. Really, film it, sell it as you don't know who won the fight. You don't know if what happened in the fight was his imagination or not. I think I would have liked to have seen a much murkier, if your perspective at that point it's his perspective, then make it really murky and unreliable. And then I think you would have hooked people really hooked people for a second, whoever was left watching, for a second season. Like, well, did he win or didn't he? Like, he doesn't know he won the fight, and that's supposed to tell you he's got dementia again. But you saw him win it. So now make me doubt whether or not he won that fight. And I think you have a stronger ending. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. They could have done it where maybe even rather than not know, have them fight it out a little longer, cut some of the other stuff in the episode, have them go into the 12th round, the bell rings, and that's it for the show, and you have to wait till next season to pick up the 12th round of this fight.
Yeah. I think if you really wanted to do it Hollywood style, maybe do a double knockdown, and the referee referee goes 1 and the screen goes to black.
So Rocky 2?
Yes, Rocky 2, without the finality of that ending.
God, I hate that ending.
Why? I'm not going to let you just go run off with that. I drop the bomb and run away from me. Why? Why do you hate that ending? This is Hollywood, baby.
So dumb.
It's Hollywood, baby. We're telling stories here. We're making movies. Come on.
God, it's so dumb. Mark, name one fight you've seen where that double knockdown happened and that was the end of a 15-round brawl.
Never.
In my lifetime, I can recall seeing one double knockdown where one guy got up and recovered okay and the other didn't.
Then I bet you we're making movies here. We're telling stories. We're doing myths and fables.
Oh, we're doing fables, all right.
All right, Pat. I'm going to give you the last word here. Actually, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you the last word. In 2010, 2009, whenever this was in production, FX says, maybe let's hold off on this. So they've got the pilot. They shelve it. It's right next to Titans. They're just holding on to this thing. They don't know what they're going to do with it, if ever. And then streaming becomes a thing. Who picks it up? How long does it last? What do you think?
I don't. I haven't seen. If I was to guess, anybody was going to pick this up. Honestly, it probably wouldn't be one of the mainline streaming services. To me, a thing like Crackle would probably be who picked it up and gave it far less of a budget to work with. It doesn't fit into the scheming, or the schematics, I should say, for me, of your big three, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. I don't see them doing a lot of, sports-oriented dramas on any of them. In fact, I don't recall any of them having any original sports-oriented shows, other than, they do the actual Inside the NFL show on Prime. But
What about HBO? I mean,
I think HBO's washed its hands totally as boxing.
On the other hand, they have HBO Max coming online. They need original programming for their streaming service, and I'm wondering if Warner Brothers maybe picks up the tab for production.
I just couldn't see it. There was a point in time where the idea of Netflix originals was so short. There were a handful of shows that Netflix had as an original show that people subscribed to the service specifically for. At that point in time, I could have seen this being a Netflix original. I don't think it ever fit the Amazon narrative of what I've seen with how much is available on there already. And the real care they put into what they produce originally, they really look for very specific things. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of Hulu is almost more about picking up stuff like this from a network that canceled it if it saw potential. But I don't know that they would have seen that based on just the numbers for this show.
Well, I know Harlots, which is a quote-unquote Hulu original, which is actually a show they picked up from the BBC. And I think that's how they get away with that, is that they're basically just streaming it. They're not paying for, and they're paying a license for it. They're not paying for production. Because apparently Harlots is extremely expensive to shoot, which, it makes sense. It's a period piece. But
that's one of those things though where you look at a sports channel, right? Not even necessarily a premier one like ESPN, but let's say something like Fox Sports, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, you look at a network like that. Why don't they play more hockey on Fox Sports? I don't understand this. That's a real sport. People like it because the cost of airing 6 hours of racing is so much cheaper, mm-hmm. and there's a redneck hillbilly market that will watch it.
Yep. Which leads me to my last and final question before we get into final thoughts and then plugs, and then I'm gonna let you go live the rest of your life. So, I can't think of another boxing show off the top of my head. Obviously more movies. You have higher budgets, longer production times. You have more to work with. You have more material to work with for movies. But I can't think of too many boxing shows. And quite frankly, I can't think of too many sports shows on television. And I'm wondering if it's because you actually have to show the sport. You have to have crowds. You have to have venues. It's hard to fake a lot of that stuff and make it look realistic. CGI costs money. It costs, that got the lag time on production. It doesn't really make it worth it, so you have to use actual bodies. I'm wondering if that's why we don't see a lot of these things on network television. Is it costs you nothing to do cop shows and family shows and things where you have people talking to each other for 30 out of the 40 minutes, as opposed to where you have to show a live sport. What do you think?
I think that's part of it, but I think also, and this is not to, please don't take this as a way to slight firefighters or police. I think people, because of the exposure to mainstream sports as opposed to exposure to actual police work or firefighter work, have a much more realistic understanding of what to expect when they see somebody in this role, and there's a credibility factor you have to meet to a certain extent. I think that's part of it, and it's very difficult to do that and do that well. Because in reality, you're going to have to pay trainers to work with and train these actors to be able to convincingly pull this off. So you're adding a lot to your production budget. You're asking a lot of your actors right there who maybe want to pursue other things outside of this. A situation like Playmakers, where ESPN had that show, which if you never saw it was terrific. The only reason that show stopped was because the NFL put pressure on them to stop it, because they didn't like that it was portraying the dark underbelly of the NFL. Mm-hmm.
What about Friday Night Lights?
Friday Night Lights a little bit different, much more family oriented. I think most people in the United States are aware of the Friday night football culture in Texas at the high school level, and a lot of that series was based more on heart than it was actual football.
Right.
Football was like the secondary means to an end in certain respects. and oh gosh, why can't I think of his name? The lead in that show took over Billy Bob Thornton's part. It's Kyle. I want to say it's Kyle something. Kyle Chandler.
Let's go with that.
Okay. I want to say his name's Kyle Chandler. He was excellent in that part, but the football was also real secondary. And I think a lot of the perception of the football in these things, and it's why you see more movies based around football or anything else, it's a lot easier to hide the stuff than it is to have it out there. You know, people don't know how to really play offensive or defensive line. So if you shoot a shot in slow motion with big guys colliding into each other, that's the Rocky effect in boxing. That's the big hooks and wide swings. That's the offensive line nature of football or defensive line nature, too, of football in a TV show. It's just easier to produce and do that with.
Right. You don't see much in the way of basketball either, but then again, I think now you're also looking for a certain physical stature that just isn't. The guys that look like they can play basketball are playing basketball. They're not in Hollywood trying to get movie roles.
Right, and it's been a long time since The White Shadow. But again, you're talking basketball again, another very demanding sport in terms of coordination, footwork. That's not an easy one to portray. That's why in a lot of aspects they've gone to actual basketball players to play basketball players in these things. Look at Ray Allen and He Got Game and Harvard Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree, but it's a conversation that I think it's worth having, and I think it's one because the question gets asked, like, why don't we see more sports-oriented TV?
Let me pitch you right now, Mark.
Okay, pitch me.
A show in the vein for an audience like Saved by the Bell about mixed martial artists in high school who have a school team that competes. And the crux is they compete against each other, ultimately to determine who's going to be the best out of them. But it's in the vein of like a Saved by the Bell, California Dreams, where it's a child audience, and it's very simplified.
I'm gonna go ahead and point to Cobra Kai and say, yeah, go for it. Martial arts is probably the easiest thing in the world to shoot in terms of production.
Because I thought of this idea initially with pro wrestling, but I don't know that it would get over the same way.
No, I think if I'm a producer and you're pitching me on the idea of Saved by the Bell meets Cobra Kai, yeah, let run with that. Because I think you keep costs low. There's not a whole lot you need for a karate tournament. And you know, like you were saying, you can shoot it. You can shoot this in a way where you don't need a lot of special effects. You basically just need a fight choreographer and maybe one person on staff to be like, that's not really what a karate kick looks like. And that's it.
You can have them holding positions where they exchange dialogue in the fight. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. No, I think look, martial arts lends itself to a lot of different milieux. I mean, you see it in action shows. You see it in sometimes you see it in cop shows. As far as martial arts competitions, there aren't too many of those shows around. But I think, I living here with my in-laws for the last month, I've talked a lot to my father-in-law about the perception of combat sports, and he was telling me last night that, like, in business, you don't even throw that out there as entertainment. For your potential customers or whatever. Tennis, baseball, things that are perceived as higher class sports. Sure, but your combat sports, those are for your lower class people. That's not what you do in high end business. His perception, his story. I don't know how true that is, but that's what he was telling me. And so I think a lot of Hollywood producers probably see it the same way. That they look at martial arts and they don't even think that like this has mass appeal. We love Cobra Kai. We've talked about it on this network. We've talked about we've talked about the martial arts aspect of it. We talk mixed martial arts on this network. we love this sort of thing, and I think it has a wider appeal than people might think. So yeah, I'll get my production company on your Saved by the Bell meets Cobra Kai show. We'll start working on that.
Fantastic.
Overall, lights out, Pat. What'd you think of the show? Would you recommend it to people?
Thumbs up, because again, you don't necessarily have to be a boxing fan to be invested in it. I think it was a very well done human drama. I think for it to get the reactions out of me for the non-boxing stuff, it shows a lot of tightly written, well thought out plot points. Which again, it's not perfect. We talked about some of the issues we had with where it forgets this until here, and oh boy, I don't like this. But what it is it's for the most part very well woven in together with a lot of moving parts. You usually have at least an A, B, and C plot in an episode, which is a lot to ask even for a 40-minute show, but it does it pretty well. And we're not talking about an hour drama in the vein of The Sopranos where you actually get an hour. We're talking 40 minutes generously, give or take. And I think for them to do as much as they did with it, it's really a shame we didn't get more.
Yeah, if they're going to resurrect this needs to be resurrected, streaming only, given the full 60 minutes. Probably needs, production-wise, to be picked up by a movie studio that's footing the bill for with some real high quality technical production, and then I think maybe you have something here. Whether or not it draws people to that streaming service is, I think, really the meat of that question. Like, do you do this or don't you? On the other hand, they canceled Swamp Thing because of accounting. And because it was too expensive to produce, so
yeah, sure it was.
I don't know what's happening in this world. Pat, I love you for having to come on and talk about this with me. This was kind of done on the fly while I'm killing time before I can go back to work. I appreciate you. Let's talk about what we're doing in the future. So tomorrow, I'm actually, since Pat's got himself a hot date or some shit, I'm going to try out.
I'm moving into my condo.
He's moving into his condo. That's what he's doing. Congratulations. Good for you. I'm going to try out somebody new on the analysis desk. I'm giving your job to somebody else, a substitute, if you will.
Maybe I'll get lucky and they'll be good.
Maybe. I put out the call to somebody in one of my podcast groups that I'm in, and he took me up on the opportunity. So I'm going to have Victor Curcado join me on the analysis desk. We're going to talk Kanaki versus Ariola. That's being broadcast on Fox. Robert Winfrey may or may not.
That's not the kid who stole the hubcaps, is it?
I don't think so. Robert Winfrey may or may not be joining us, depending on if he's done with his Covington versus Lawler coverage over on 411. We've got Patsy Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat, this Monday on Source Material. We've got Hobbs and Shaw on Tuesday. Wednesday, we've got Volbeat, Rewind, Replay, Reboot. We've got Orange is the New Black on Thursday. Friday, we're taking a break. No shows. Maybe. Things are kind of done on the fly here, so you never know. But we've got a whole bunch of wrestling coming up this weekend, not to mention Glow Season 3. So we've got the Ring of Honor Super Summer card Friday night. We've got NXT TakeOver. Shut up, Pat. We've got NXT TakeOver Toronto Saturday night, and then SummerSlam on Sunday. We'll talk about it.
Wait, really? It's coming up that fast?
Yes, sir. So we'll talk about SummerSlam weekend. So we'll talk about all three of those shows on Tuesday, August 13th. Meanwhile, back to Saturday. Pat in his new condo will be back with me on the analysis desk. We'll be talking Carl Frampton versus Emmanuel Dominguez on ESPN+. So,
love me some Carl Frampton.
Yeah. Do you have ESPN+? Or are you going to find alternative means?
I quite honestly don't know what you're suggesting by that.
We should probably drop the subject. Yep. So yes, we'll be doing coverage of Frampton versus Dominguez on ESPN Plus Saturday night.
Do you feel like I do?
Frampton comes alive, baby. Myself, Patrick Mullin again, who has inserted himself into this.
Not the first time that's happened.
No, sir. And Jesse Starcher, we're going to be doing a split 7-inch, as I like to call them. Source material, Damn You, Hollywood, split 7-inch for The Kitchen. We will compare the book to the movie. Pat, I hear you didn't know there was a book. You found out there was a book, and then you read the book, and you decided?
Yeah. So my family has some ties to the actual events, shall we say, that this book ignores largely and makes light of and has no understanding of how things work. So, yeah.
So there you have it. We'll talk the book, we'll talk the movie, and we'll talk real life. And Pat will tell you it stinks. All of it. So as we're talking about SummerSlam on Tuesday, August 13th, the horror people, Robert Winfrey, Alexis Hana, and Jason Teasley will be discussing scary stories to tell in the dark. Jesse Starcher and TMC from the Four Podsmen will be reviewing Slipknot with me. We Are Not Your Kind on the Metal Hammer of Doom. Sean's back for Glow Season 3. As part of the Superblog team-up, myself and Jesse Starcher will be watching Jupiter Ascending. So that'll be fun. We're with you, girls. We know, we according to Wikipedia, girls have claimed that as their own sci-fi, and we are with you on that. We'll watch it because we support you. Speaking of sci-fi, I'm finally getting around to watching Lost in Space Season 1. Myself and David Wright. Myself and David Wright will do a quick TV party on that. And then at night, Robert Winfrey is going to try to split his brain in two. He's going to do 411 coverage. At the same time, he'll be doing analysis with me for the main card of Cormier versus Miocic. I'm sure it'll be terrible, and we'll never do it again. Saga of the Swamp Thing, book 1 by Alan Moore on August 19th.
Fantastic.
The Swamp Thing.
Now there's a show I can listen to.
The Swamp Thing TV show on August 20th. They Ought is Moira.
Wait, which one?
The DC Universe.
Oh, eh.
They Ought is Moida on August 21st. And then Sean, in his 4th show in a row in the month of August, will be doing an on-trial for Swamp Thing 1982. I'll be defending, he'll be prosecuting, and a good time will be had by all. Speaking of good times...
Except for you, Mark.
Stop it. Speaking of good times, Good Omens. Myself, Al Sedano, and Jesse Starcher will be doing a TV party for that on Friday, August 23rd. This is what I'm doing, folks. I'm not allowed to work or drive until September, so I'm just filling my life up with podcasts. We got nothing going on Saturday the 24th, as near as I can tell. I don't know why, though.
Maybe we should do a TV party for the 1990 Swamp Thing TV show.
That's a possibility, if you can tell me where they're streaming it. However, Saturday...
There's a TV network called Heroes and Icons. You can watch it every morning.
Okay. I will look into that and get back to you. Streaming Boys podcast. Myself, Ronnie Adams, and Alexis Hana will be discussing D23 on Sunday, August 25th. And then we end August with DC vs. Superman Lobo on Source Material, Krypton Season 2, Rage of Light Imploder, and Alexis Hana and I will be doing X-Men. TV party tonight for the Banana Splits movie that'll be airing on Sci-Fi earlier that week. We'll take a break on Friday because God knows I'm going to need one. And then you and I are back together again. We'll be doing a review as soon as it ends. As soon as the last match is called, Pat and I are going to jump on the podcast machine here, and we're going to do a review of NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff. And then it'll end just in time for you to then jump over to Bleacher Report Live to watch AEW All the Way Out, which will be followed by a review at some point in September. That's everything I'm doing. What about you? And hey, the Casual Heroes put up a podcast. When are you recording with them, Pat?
So allegedly we're recording today. I wouldn't hold my breath. We're supposed to be at 5 p.m. today recording a show about the life and times of the greatest wrestler to grace God's green earth, in his own words, the late Harley Race.
Well, I'll be waiting for that podcast with bated breath. I'm excited. I'm excited to see the Casual Heroes reunion.
Yeah, well, there's some X factors to that. One is Gavin scheduled it. 2 is that Jed is supposed to be on it with me.
Interesting.
3 is that I'm supposed to be on it.
It's a lot of variables.
Really is. We talk about a lot of moving parts with Lights Out, but somehow, Casual Heroes, are going to try to record a show. There was one that dropped today about massage, if you're interested in that. I don't mean Oriental massage. So that probably killed about half the listenership that we would have had right off the bat.
Interesting.
But, that's just how things are. And the swamp is my world. It is who I am. It is what I am. I was once a man. I know the evil men do. Do not bring your evil here, I warn you. Beware the wrath of Swamp Thing.
All right, I am going to look into that TV show, sir, and if I can find it, if I can find a place where I can watch it at my leisure on my phone or computer, I will hit you up and we will figure out when we're going to record it. But until then, in the meantime, in between time, we thank you for listening to our ramblings. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Get to Old Navy for the biggest sale of the year. Up to 60% off all back-to-school styles for kids and baby. Get flip-flops for $2, graphic tees for $4, shorts for $6, and jeans for $8. Right now, get the best kids' styles at kid-size prices. Just $2, $4, $6, and $8. Can't wait to wear it? Buy online and pick up in-store free today. Up to 60% off all kids and baby styles now at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 7/29 to 8/11. Select styles. Excludes in-store clearance.
Miami's getting ready for the arrival of FC Barcelona. On Tuesday, August 6th, Bayfront Park is the venue for Barca Fest Miami. It's an event packed with fun, music, and a lot of Barca. Entertainment, Barca store, and food trucks. But the main attraction of the party will be live performances by Playing Skills and Pedro Capó, who's had one of the biggest hits of the summer. See you at Bayfront Park on August 6th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. to enjoy the Barca Fest.